Before you do anything else, pull out your phone, open the stopwatch, and set it down where you can see it. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to put you through 3 tests, 30 seconds each, 90 seconds total. And I want you to actually try them, not just nod along from the couch, because the version of you that watches this passively and the version of you that actually puts the phone down and tries it are going to walk away from this video with 2 completely different experiences. Here's why this matters. Researchers studying primate strength have found that pound for pound, a silverback gorilla can produce somewhere between 6 and 10 times the force output of a conditioned human male. 6 to 10 times. Not because their muscle fibers are made of some exotic material we don't have access to, because of how that tissue is recruited, loaded, and trained by a life spent climbing, hanging, carrying, and exploding into movement every single day, without a gym membership, without a coach, without a single rep counted. We're going to run 3 of those movement patterns today: a hang, a jump, and a hold. No equipment beyond a bar and some open floor. No excuses and no escape, because unlike a lot of fitness content, this isn't something you can fake your way through. Either you hold the position or you don't. Either the timer beats you or you beat the timer. And here's the uncomfortable part. In early informal testing, friends, family, people who came through my own gym thinking this would be easy, more than 9 out of 10 people who attempt the first test alone don't make it past the 15-second mark. Not because they're weak in the gym. A lot of these were people who could deadlift twice their body weight. They failed anyway, because the kind of strength we're testing isn't trained in a gym at all. It's trained by life, the kind of life almost none of us live anymore. By the end of this video, you'll have your total primal score. You'll know exactly which of the 3 tests exposed your biggest weakness, and you'll have a simple plan, one you can start tomorrow morning with 0 new equipment to start closing that gap. Stopwatch ready? Let's get into it. Let's start with a picture. On one side, imagine a modern gym goer, strong lifts, good physique, probably benches more than his own body weight, maybe even has a 6-pack he's proud of. On the other side, picture a 400-pound silverback gorilla sitting calmly in a forest clearing, barely paying attention to anything around him. On paper, the human looks more fit. He's leaner, more defined, probably has better numbers on a treadmill, probably looks better in a mirror under good lighting. But both of them in a real physical situation, climbing, hanging from a branch, sprinting and changing direction over uneven ground, lifting something awkward and unbalanced off the floor, and the gap becomes obvious almost instantly. The gorilla isn't just bigger, he's built for a different kind of demand entirely. And so, underneath all the modern conditioning are you. I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is the gap I want you to think about for the rest of this video. The gap between gym strong and primal strong. Gym strong is about moving a weight from point A to point B, usually along a fixed path, usually for a few seconds at a time, with rest in between in a controlled environment with mirrors and music and air conditioning. Primal strong is about your body's ability to support its own weight, absorb force, and keep working when things get uncomfortable, for longer than feels reasonable, with no rest, no predictable path, and definitely no air conditioning. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Your body doesn't know the difference between I chose not to use this and I don't have this anymore. It only responds to demand. No demand, no capacity. That's the entire rule. And modern life has spent the last few decades systematically removing almost every demand that used to keep this kind of strength online. On this channel, we operate by one standard. We call it the Silverback Standard. And the idea behind it is simple. Modern life makes us soft. Chairs, elevators, cars, phones, remote controls, food delivery apps. Every single part of our environment has been engineered, often quite deliberately, to remove physical demand from our day. And our bodies, because they're efficient, brutally, relentlessly efficient, adapt to that removed demand immediately. They get weaker in exactly the ways that don't show up on a scale or a mirror. You can look great and still fail in 15 seconds. I've seen it happen on camera more than I can count. Primal movement is the antidote. Hanging, carrying, jumping, crawling awkward positions under load, these aren't trendy workout gimmicks, and they're not some new training fad dressed up in animal branding to sell programs. They're the actual inputs your body was designed to receive, going back hundreds of thousands of years, long before any of us ever stepped foot in a gym. And when you reintroduce them, even briefly, even just 30 seconds at a time, you start to reclaim a kind of resilience that modern training, with all its machines and isolation exercises, tends to skip right over entirely. That's the whole philosophy in one line. We don't just lift weight, we reclaim our nature. Not we lift weight to look better, not we lift weight to hit a number. We reclaim something that was always ours, and that modern life has been quietly taking away from us one comfortable convenience at a time. I didn't land on this idea in a classroom or off a research paper. Years ago, I spent a weekend at a friend's cabin with no power, no running water, and more importantly, no chairs. By the second day, simple things had become genuinely difficult. Getting up off the ground without using my hands, carrying water back from the stream, climbing over a fallen tree without thinking about it first. I remember sitting there, sore in places I didn't know could get sore, realizing that the version of fit I'd spent years building in a gym had almost nothing to do with the version of capable that weekend was actually asking for. That gap is what eventually became this channel, and it's the same gap these 3 tests are designed to surface in about 90 seconds flat. No cabin, no weekend, no power outage. And the 3 tests you're about to do are a direct snapshot of how much of that nature you still have access to, right now, today, before any training changes anything. No warm-up needed beyond what you'd normally do, no special gear, just you, a bar, some floor space, and a stopwatch. So, here's the structure, and I want you to follow this exactly because the order matters. Each test runs exactly 30 seconds. After each one, I'll give you a quick way to score yourself, from sedentary all the way up to silverback tier. Stack all 3 scores together at the end and you'll have your total primal score, a single number that tells you more about your actual physical readiness than any scale, any mirror, or any number on a barbell ever could.
Test 1 is waiting for you right now, and it starts with your hands. And fair warning, this is the one almost everyone underestimates, right up until the timer actually starts. Test 1 is called the dead hang, and all you need is a pull-up bar, a sturdy tree branch, the rim of a door frame rated to hold your weight, or even the edge of a playground structure if you're outside. Anything that lets your full body weight hang freely will work. Here's the setup. Grip the bar with both hands, knuckles facing away from you, and let your full body weight hang from your arms, feet off the ground, shoulders relaxed down away from your ears rather than shrugged up toward them. This isn't a chin-up, and I want to be really clear about that because people instinctively want to pull. You're not pulling. You're not trying to get your chin over the bar. You're just hanging there, dead weight, letting gravity do exactly what gravity wants to do to your joints and your grip. Now here's the twist that makes this a primal test rather than a gym test. Don't wrap your thumbs around the bar in the standard grip. Use what's sometimes called a false grip. Thumb on the same side as your fingers, all 5 digits hooked over the top, like a hook rather than a clamp. This is closer to how a primate's hand actually engages a branch, and it removes a lot of the mechanical advantage your thumb normally gives you. If you've ever watched a climber transition between holds or watched footage of primates moving through a canopy, you'll notice this exact grip. Full hand, no thumb wrap, weight distributed across the fingers and palm rather than locked in by an opposable thumb. Start your stopwatch. Hang for as long as you can, up to 30 seconds. While you're hanging, or if you're watching first before you try, here's what's actually happening inside your body. Grip strength isn't just about your hands. It's tightly linked to your entire upper body's connective tissue health, your tendons, your fascia, the structures that hold everything together and transfer force between your muscles and your bones. And several long-term population studies have found grip strength to be one of the strongest available predictors of overall longevity. In some analyses, a stronger predictor than blood pressure readings. Think about that for a moment. A 30-second hang from a bar is giving you information that's been linked in large population studies to how long you might live. Your forearms are quietly reporting on the condition of your whole system. So here's your scale. If you dropped before the 15-second mark, that places you in what we'll call the sedentary zone. Your grip endurance and likely your connective tissue resilience has been heavily deconditioned by modern life. That's not a judgment, it's just data. Most people who spend their days typing, scrolling, and driving land here, and honestly, that's most people. If you made it between 15 and 25 seconds, you're in the average zone, functional, but with real room to build, and probably someone who does some kind of regular activity, even if it's not specifically grip-focused. 25 to 30 seconds without dropping puts you in the athletic zone, meaning your forearms and shoulders already carry a solid baseline of endurance work. Climbers, rowers, and people who do a lot of carrying tend to land here. And if 30 seconds felt almost easy, if you were nowhere close to failing when the timer ran out, that's silverback tier. That's the top bracket, and very few people land there on a first attempt, even people who consider themselves strong. And if you dropped early, 8 seconds, 10 seconds, maybe you didn't even make it that far, I want you to actually sit with that for a second instead of brushing past it. That little sting is useful. I felt the exact same thing the first time I tried this, long before any of this training, back when I thought a strong grip was just something climbers had and the rest of us didn't need. Hold on to that feeling, because by the end of this video, it isn't going to be a verdict on you. It's going to be your starting line. One quick troubleshooting note before we move on, because I know some of you are about to message me about this. If your hand slipped before your grip actually gave out, if it was more of a the bar was sweaty and I lost contact situation than a my forearms won't fire situation, try it again with a slightly firmer hold, but don't squeeze as hard as you can the entire time. Counterintuitively, gripping at max effort to hold 30 seconds will often fatigue you faster than finding the minimum grip force needed to stay attached and holding steady there. That's a small thing, but it's exactly the kind of efficiency that separates someone who's trained this pattern from someone who hasn't. Whatever zone you landed in, lock it in. That's the first piece of your total primal score. Now, notice what's happening in your forearms right now if you just did that hang. That deep burning fatigue building in the muscles that flex your fingers. That sensation is your body reporting that it just spent 30 seconds producing isometric force, holding a contraction without movement. And here's the thing, the ability to produce force isometrically is completely different from the ability to produce force explosively. These run on different systems, recruit different muscle fiber types, and require completely different kinds of training. A lot of people who scored well on the hang are about to get humbled by test 2, because grip endurance and explosive power come from almost entirely different systems in the body, and very few training programs develop both at the same time. So, shake out your hands, give your forearms 30 seconds to recover, and let's move to the floor, because test 2 is about to ask your legs and tendons a very different question. Test 2 is called the Silverback Leap, and it's a max effort broad jump series. Find yourself about 10 to 15 feet of open, flat space, a hallway, a backyard, a park path, a garage with a car moved out, all will work fine. Just make sure the ground is even and you're not going to land on anything that'll roll out on from under you. Here's the setup. Stand with your feet roughly shoulder width apart. When the timer starts, you're going to perform repeated standing broad jumps, jumping forward as far as possible with both feet, landing as softly and as quickly as you can, and immediately resetting for the next jump. You have 30 seconds, and the goal is to cover the total distance possible across as many jumps as you can manage. Don't worry about jumping in a perfectly straight line down a hallway. If you need to turn around partway through because you've run out of space, that's completely fine. What matters is the total ground covered, not the direction. This test isn't really about how high you can jump or even how far a single jump goes. It's about something most fitness programs almost completely ignore: tendon elasticity, your body's ability to load energy into your tendons on landing and immediately release that energy back out on the next jump, almost like a spring being compressed and released.
This is sometimes called the stretch shortening cycle, and it's the single biggest difference between an athlete who looks explosive and one who actually is. Here's a useful way to picture it. Watch slow-motion footage of a gorilla landing from a drop, and the impact seems to disappear. It's absorbed through the hips, the ankles, and the whole posterior chain working together in a split second, then redirected straight back into the next movement with almost no pause at all. Now, compare that to most humans landing from a jump. A hard heel strike, knees diving inward, a visible pause, sometimes a full second or more before the next movement can even begin. That pause is energy being lost as impact stress instead of being recycled into the next rep. Closing that gap, shrinking that pause down towards zero, is most of what separates an explosive athlete from an average one. And here's the encouraging part. It's almost entirely trainable, often faster than people expect. So here's your scale, based on total distance covered across all your jumps in 30 seconds. If your total came out under about 40 feet, that's the sedentary zone. Your nervous system is likely not well practiced at producing or absorbing force quickly, even if you have decent muscle mass from other kinds of training. This is incredibly common, even among people who lift heavy regularly, because heavy lifting and explosive output are, again, different systems. 40 to 60 feet puts you in the average zone. You have access to some explosive output, but there's probably a hitch in either your landing or your reset, some small pause that's eating into your total distance without you even noticing it. 60 to 80 feet is the athletic zone, where most of your jumps were both long and smooth, with minimal hesitation between reps. And if you cleared 80 feet or more, especially if your jump stayed consistent rather than getting shorter as you fatigued, that's silverback tier, and that level of repeated explosive output under fatigue is genuinely rare.
A quick note if you felt your knees cave inward on landing, or if you felt a sharp twinge anywhere rather than just muscle fatigue. That's actually valuable information too, separate from your score. It usually points to weak hip stabilizers, rather than weak legs overall, and it's worth paying attention to before you start adding plyometric work into your regular training, because that's exactly the kind of pattern that leads to knee issues down the road if it goes unaddressed. Nothing to panic about, but worth noting. Add this score to your hang score. 2 of 3 pieces of your total primal score are now locked in. Now pay attention to how your legs feel right now. There's a specific kind of fatigue setting in, not the burning of the forearms from test 1, but a deeper, heavier feeling, almost like your legs are filling with sand, or like there's a slight delay between your brain telling your legs to move and your legs actually responding. That's your nervous system reporting that it's been asked to produce maximal output repeatedly, and it's starting to dial back the signal to your muscles to protect itself, a built-in safety mechanism that kicks in well before your muscles are anywhere close to actual failure. That feeling, your body trying to talk you out of continuing well before you actually run out of capacity, is exactly what Test 3 is built around. Because the final test isn't about strength and it isn't about power. It's about what happens after both of those start to fade, and whether you can stay in position anyway, even while your nervous system is sending you every signal it can to stop. Before we get into this one, if the first 2 tests already humbled you a little, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach the people who need to see it, and I promise you this next test is the one that separates people who talk about being primal from people who actually are. Test 3 is called the Knuckle-Dragger Hold, and it's the simplest setup of the 3. No bar, no jumping, nothing complicated, but for most people, it's the hardest 30 seconds of this entire video. I've had people breeze through the hang, crush the jump series, and then completely fall apart on this one. Don't underestimate it just because it looks like standing still. Here's how to get into position. Stand with your feet noticeably wider than shoulder width, toes turned out slightly, somewhere around 30 to 45 degrees. Now, drop into a deep squat, hips as close to your heels as your mobility allows, and let your elbows rest gently against the insides of your knees, almost like you're prying them apart. Your chest stays up, your heels stay flat on the ground if at all possible. This is close to a resting position you'd see in cultures around the world where people spend long stretches of time at ground level without chairs, a position that's been used for eating, working, resting, and socializing across huge parts of human history and across huge parts of the world today. It's not exotic. It's actually one of the most common resting postures in human history. It's just become exotic to us specifically because of furniture. Start your timer. Your job is simple. Hold this position without standing up and without letting your knees collapse inward for 30 seconds. Here's what's actually being tested. Unlike the hang, which mostly tested your grip, and unlike the jump, which tested explosive output, this test is primarily about your central nervous system's ability to keep sending a stable, hold this position signal to dozens of muscles at once. Your calves, your quads, your glutes, your deep hip stabilizers, even muscles in your feet you've probably never consciously thought about, even as fatigue builds up and your body starts looking for any excuse to bail out. Most people are fine for the first 10 to 15 seconds. Then, somewhere around the 22-second mark, something interesting happens. A fine tremor starts in the legs, sometimes visible, sometimes just felt. Not because the muscles themselves have run out of fuel. 30 seconds isn't long enough to actually deplete the energy stores in your muscles. It's because the nervous system's grip on those muscles starts to loosen under the combined load of fatigue from the first 2 tests, plus the demand of this one. How you respond to that tremor, whether you can consciously override it and hold your form, or whether your knees start collapsing inward and your heels start lifting up, is the whole test. If your heels came up off the ground almost immediately before you even started shaking, that's usually an ankle mobility issue rather than a strength issue, and it's worth knowing the difference. A lot of people who spent years in shoes with elevated heels, or who sit in chairs for most of the day, lose the ankle range of motion needed to get into this position with flat feet at all, which means the test is partly measuring something that happened to your ankles years before today, not just your strength right now. Again, useful information, not a judgment. Here's your scale.
If you broke form or stood up before 15 seconds, that's the sedentary zone. Your nervous system isn't yet practiced at maintaining stability under fatigue, which is extremely common given how rarely modern life asks us to hold any position for more than a moment without sitting down, leaning against something, or shifting our weight. 15 to 22 seconds is the average zone. You've got a real baseline here, even if it's not pretty by the end.
22 to 30 seconds with some visible shaking but maintained form is the athletic zone. In many tactical fitness style assessments, this range is treated as a solid baseline for general physical readiness. And if you held the full 30 seconds with minimal shaking, heels still flat, form clean the entire time, that's Silverback tier. And that's rare even among people who train regularly, because so few training programs ever ask the nervous system to do exactly this. Add this final score to your other two. Sedentary is worth 1 point, average 2, athletic 3, Silverback tier 4. Add them up and you've got your total Primal score out of 12. Now here's the part that actually matters more than the number itself. Whatever score you landed, whether you scraped together a 3 or you're sitting at a 10, the real value of these 3 tests isn't the number, it's the information. Each test maps to a different system in your body: your connective tissue, your explosive power, your nervous system stability under fatigue, and your weakest test tells you exactly where to start, not where you should start based on some generic program, where your body today actually needs the most attention. So here's your Primal Reset. 3 simple additions you can start tomorrow morning, each one targeting one of the tests you just did. I'm not going to give you a 12-week program with spreadsheets and percentages. I'm going to give you 3 habits, each one taking less time than it took to watch this video, that you can fold into a day you're already living. If the hang exposed you, if your grip gave out early, the fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Hang from something for 10 to 20 seconds 2 or 3 times a day. Before a shower, before you sit down to eat, whenever you walk past a door frame bar on your way through the house. You're not training the failure, and you're not trying to turn this into a workout. You're just refamiliarizing your connective tissue with bearing your body weight through your hands, something it used to do constantly and has probably forgotten how to do gracefully. Done consistently, this tends to produce a noticeable shift within 2 to 3 weeks, and most people are surprised by how quickly their grip endurance comes back online once the demand is reintroduced. If the jump series exposed you, if your distance dropped off fast, or your landings felt heavy and stiff, start with 5 to 8 broad jumps, focusing entirely on landing softly and quietly. I want you to actually try to land without making noise. Don't chase distance yet, chase a quiet landing. The distance comes later, once your body trusts that landing won't hurt, once your tendons start to relearn how to absorb that impact instead of just taking it. Do this 2 to 3 times a week, ideally on a day when your legs aren't already fatigued from something else, so your nervous system has the bandwidth to actually learn the pattern rather than just survive it. And if the deep squat hold exposed you, if the shaking started early or your heels lifted off the ground, spend just 60 seconds total each day sitting in that deep squat position, broken into chunks if you need to. 10 seconds, 6 times a day, adds up to the same 60 seconds and might be far more realistic depending on your day. Hold a door frame for balance if your ankles are tight at first, but no shame in that, and honestly, most people need it. This is less about strength and more about teaching your nervous system that this position is safe to occupy for longer than a few seconds, and teaching your ankles that they're allowed to move that way again. 3 small habits. None of them require equipment you don't already have. None of them require more than a few minutes a day total across all 3. But stacked together, they directly target the exact 3 gaps this video just exposed. Not generic gaps, not someone else's gaps. Yours specifically, based on a number you just generated in the last few minutes. Here's a way to think about the next 30 days. Every morning before you do anything else, before coffee, before your phone, before anything, pick whichever one of the 3 felt worse today and do it. Just that one. 30 seconds, maybe a minute. That's the entire commitment. Some days you might do all 3 because you got a couple of minutes to spare. Most days, just pick the worst one and handle it. At the end of 30 days, run all 3 tests again. Same bar, same floor space, same stopwatch, and compare your new total Primal score to today's number. I'd be willing to bet almost every single person who actually does this sees movement in at least 2 of the 3. One more tip if you're serious about the comparison. Film yourself doing all 3 tests today, even just on your phone, propped against something. Not to post anywhere unless you want to, just for you. 30 days from now, watching that footage back next to your new attempt will show you things a number alone never could. How much smoother your landings got, how much steadier your hold became, how longer you can hang on before your grip starts talking you out of it. I want you to do 2 things before you go. First, drop your total primal score in the comments out of 12, along with which test exposed you the most. I genuinely want to see the spread because my guess is the deep squat hold is going to be the one that humbles the most people, and I'd love to be proven right or wrong by actual data from you. If enough of you do this, I'll put together a breakdown video showing exactly how the score is distributed across this whole audience, which test is the real weak point for most people watching this channel. Second, if there's someone in your life who talks a big game about how strong they are, someone who's always got an opinion about their lifts at the gym, or someone who's a little too proud of how they look with their shirt off, send this video. Not as a call-out, as an invitation, because the gap between gym strong and primal strong is one that almost nobody discovers until they actually try something like this, on camera, with a stopwatch running, with nowhere to hide and no spotter to bail them out. Next time, we're taking this further with the Jaguar Reflex Test, 3 tests built entirely around reaction speed and change of direction, the kind of demands that separate athletes who look fast from athletes who actually are fast. If today's test humbled you even a little, that one is going to hit different, and I'd start preparing for it now if I were you. Until then, and hit subscribe, remember the standard we operate by here. Modern life makes us soft. Primal movement makes us unbreakable. We don't just lift weight, we reclaim our nature. I'll see you in the next one.